For this lecture, I would like to take a moment to talk about symbols, and I want to take a moment as we go through this to point out to you that this is not something to digest and let it go in one ear and out the other after you take the test, but this is stuff that's going to come up over and over again as we study things like ritual and magic from an anthropological point of view. So it's really important that we get a good foundation in what symbols are. So to begin with, there's a lot of nice examples in your book, and I do hope that you take the time to read through those examples. I'll hit on a couple of those, and I'll offer some new thoughts as well, but let's just say that a symbol for now is anything that stands for something else. Those of you that are taking my cultural class or have taken my cultural class will come across a couple of these terms when we talk about language, which is obviously a symbolic system, right? Where things, these sounds are standing for something else. One of the defining features of a symbol is that it's arbitrary. That means that there's no inherent or natural meaning. X means Y because we agree that X means Y. X does not automatically mean Y. And if you go to another culture, you might find that X and Y are not even associated with each other, let alone mean the same thing. So they are culturally defined and they are culturally constructed, and they involve sort of group agreement on what the meaning is. So there's no natural or inherent meaning. They also involve displacement, which is key to being a human being from my point of view, which is that ability to represent things that are not present, that are remote from the symbolizer, as it says there. So this means I can talk about something that happened yesterday, something that's going to happen in the future. I can symbolically represent something that happened long, long ago. I could symbolically represent something that's happening right now in another place. I can symbolically represent something that's never going to happen, that never has happened. Because I don't have to talk about only things that are present. We're in an open symbolic system, which means that we can create new symbols, we can change the meanings, and we can use displacement to sort of be creative and talk about things and represent things that maybe animals can't. As it says there, that animals usually use what are called closed systems, which means that it always means the same thing. When my dog barks, it pretty much always means the same thing. He's not really like composing a poem about his mother when he's barking at the doorbell. He's barking to signify that the doorbell is ringing. And it always means that to him. He won't come up with a new meaning for it. He won't change the meaning of it. And he will bark every time the doorbell rings because it is a closed system for him. But symbols are an open system where nothing means anything until we say it means that, and it doesn't have to stay that meaning forever. Sometimes anthropologists talk about symbols as onions. And as you start to peel them, you find that there's meanings, layers and layers of meanings. And then what you also might find out is that my onion and your onion are different. And we might be looking at this onion, this symbol, and providing different meanings to it, placing different meanings in that symbol. And that's the nature of symbols. They're very open and they're very arbitrary. And so these symbols become the primary way that we understand and represent reality. There is really no reality without symbols. Everything our brain does, everything our brain comes across, we find a way to categorize it, we find a way to apply meaning to it, or we find a way to simply not perceive it. And there are plenty of things we don't perceive, as you know. Our brains and our eyes and our ears, our senses aren't capable of perceiving everything. But those things that we do perceive through those senses, we tend to assign meaning to them, and we tend to make them symbolic. And this is the way that our brains organize and classify reality. And so essentially there really is no reality without symbols. Symbols are the baseline reality for human beings. You can think about that on your own. Types of religious symbols. Now these are terms that I'm sort of applying here because your book doesn't really go into this, but you have these visual symbols, which they do talk about. But the idea is that these visual symbols are actual icons. They're actual depictions of a sacred object or idea that have a visual presentation. And again, these are arbitrary. So a swastika might mean one thing to a Buddhist, and it might mean something completely different to an American. or somebody who associates it with World War II and the Nazis. A pentagram can mean different things because when it comes down to it, it's just lines with meaning assigned to the lines. So a very specific type of visual symbol is an icon or iconography, which your book talks about when it talks about sacred art. And these are visual depictions of characters from stories. These are depictions of the gods or the spirits, and they serve many functions, possibly as a way of telling stories, as a way of preserving stories, as a mnemonic device, and also as objects of meditation. Again, they're arbitrary, so their meaning is going to be culturally defined. You have linguistic symbols, such as your book talks about color terms. Again, back to what I was saying about defining reality, color terms. Colors are a very basic part of being a human being, of perceiving the world as a human being, and we don't all label them or classify them the same way, cross-culturally speaking. Color terms are a good example of linguistic symbols that are arbitrary and culturally defined. Then we have myths, we have singing, and we have chant. All of this is symbolic language. Then there are embodied symbols, where we actually take on the symbol and give it life through our body, such as body art or clothing, jewelry, these types of things. And then also ritual and dance, very important part of symbolizing religion through ritual and dance. And that symbolism actually happens through your body, through your own actions with your body, by acting out that ritual, by performing that dance.